Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back, or thank you for joining us. If you're just wandering into our wonderful architecture track here today, I am delighted to have Justina with us here to talk about this. We love to talk about microservices and all these other things, and we forget about the fact you got to deploy this stuff. What does that look like? There's all this automation that we need in order to do this well at scale, at speed. So I was very excited when I saw this submission, and I am delighted to turn it over to Justina.
Thanks, Nate. I really appreciate it. Super excited to be here. Share my screen really quick. Mhm. Awesome. Welcome to Spring One. If this is your first time, I'm really, as I said, super excited to be here. If you're interested in learning about how to deploy fearlessly in a continuous world, you're in the right session. I'm Justina Neen. I'm a developer evangelist at Optimizely. I'm on the developer relations team. And this is a picture from our virtual offsite that I took a screenshot of about 2 weeks ago. The theme was hats, because if you're in developer relations, you know that we wear tons of hats. So I love my team, and it's just really fun to work with them. Just a few fun facts before we get started. I'm currently learning how to cook, as I'm sure a lot of you are, and editing videos. That's been a lot of fun, since a lot of things have been converted to virtual. And so we're testing out doing video demos and things like that. For fun, I like to box, draw, and read. And then I thought it'd be fun to include something I last worked on, which was a Slack bot for Hack Week at work. 2 weeks ago, we built a Slack bot that answers product questions. So that was a lot of fun too, especially because I have a background, and I really love bots. And so you can reach me on Twitter at Justina Eats. And so, kind of like what Nate was saying about deploying, there are lots of tools that you can use. So we're going to go through quite a few of them, and more tools and tactics that teams that I've seen put into place. So to start out with, the bulk of this talk, the analogy will be around airplanes. And so, back in the day, engineering, and still today, engineering was very focused on building a tangible, real life product. And in this case, airplanes. And so, in this day, in this continuous world, there's a lot of fear around updating your application or updating that plane while it's moving, while people are using it. And there's this expectation now. I feel like more than ever that your product, that your application is going to continue working no matter what. I feel like that threshold for bugs is just very, very low now, and people don't want to feel that friction. And so, as an engineer, you don't want to be responsible for crashing that plane or crashing that application. Customers feel that friction, but more importantly, all of that time and energy and engineering resources that you put into that plane, that application, is now wasted. And so, you really want to be careful with that. And a lot of companies that we've talked to put some preventative methods and measures in place that we'll go over today, and we'll focus on a couple of them. The first being automated testing. So teams know that there are features that they know and have expectations for their behavior to work a specific way. So they build simulative environments where they can test that, and they test these known behaviors. But some folks ask, well, what about the features that we don't know, or what about the behaviors that we can't anticipate? What do we do there? Some companies like to use QA environments, or internal environments, and have their QA teams test these new features and products before they roll it out to their greater audience. But then the drawback here is that they're internal environments. So the question always comes up, which is, well, how do I know that this is how an actual customer would use the product? You don't. And so you don't know until you get the product into the hands of actual customers. That's where this idea of blue green deployments come in. And so the plane analogy is a little shaky here, but it's still fun to think about, in terms of applications, which is, let's say you put out your new version and there's something that goes wrong with it in the wild. And so you swap it back to the old version, hoping that your customer does not notice. in the airplane analogy case, it would be that you're swapping the airplane as it's flying, which sounds terrifying, which is why this talk is about deploying fearlessly in a continuous world. And so then the concept of stage releases is being introduced here. And so you're with stage releases, you're able to monitor the product, the people using the new version of the product, and really you're only impacting that set of users that's using that new version. But sometimes this can get pretty expensive. So now we're thinking, what can we do? What kind of guardrails can we put in place? This is where feature flags come in. And feature flags are super powerful and all encompassing in terms of all these fears that have built up from being able to see firsthand customer experience, not wanting to impact all of your customers if you want to release something new. Feature flags are really powerful. So, this is what we'll be focusing on through the duration of this talk. And I'll show you how to implement feature flags and how you can get your entire organization to think about them. So, if you're unfamiliar with feature flags, they give you the power to enable or disable features for a certain set of customers at a time. They're really powerful in terms of um, giving you the power to show a customer something and take that away at the same time, especially when you have to in the event of a critical bug. And so having that power is just really that power to control your features and that granular control really helps alleviate these types of fears. Within the concept of feature flags is this idea of controlled rollouts. And I've seen a lot of different companies do different things here. Most start building their new feature or product in their local development environment. Then they then move it to like their staging environment, try to get their PM's approval or, get acceptance criteria through things like that. I've seen customers do things where they then release maybe that feature to a subset of their beta customers. Whether they have a list, maybe they say that 5% of their audience is their beta users. And so ultimately, the goal is to try to get real customer usage on these new features and new products. And then you're doing a gradual rollout if that was what you intended for this feature. The example I like to talk about a lot is at Optimizely, we recently released a feature called adaptive audiences. And what our lead engineer did for that was he actually released the feature to 5% of our audience week over week. So the first week he released it to 5%, the second week to 10% of our audience, 15% moving forward. I remember specifically at Stand Up, at the 30 when 30% of our audience had seen the feature, someone actually identified a critical bug. And so what that lead engineer was able to do was he's able to roll back that feature since he wrapped it in a feature flag. That means that 70% of our audience never encountered that bug or saw that feature in the first place. He's able to roll that back, still in production behind a feature flag, really iterate on that bug, and then roll it back out once he was happy with the way it looked. Then he continued as that feature is designed to roll it out to 100% of the audience. So that was just a really neat way to see exactly the power that feature flags gives you, especially during rocky times like that. A lot of teams also ask the question, well, where can I use feature flags? Especially newer organizations, especially organizations that are newer to feature flags, thinking about how they can adopt and really evangelize feature flags at their orgs. And I tell them that it actually fits throughout the entire development lifecycle, starting with build and test. Really making it easy to integrate code here as you're wrapping things behind feature flags. So you're not bumping into things like messy merge conflicts. During the deploy, something that when I talk to customers, they actually come with this requirement of being able to decouple releases from deploys so that they could have more control over their deployments and deploy actually more frequently without having that pressure of thinking that deployments and releases happen at the same time. Last but certainly not least is um, I've been to a couple DevOps conferences, and I feel like the joke that was always made on stage was, Oh, well, I was paged at 2 a.m., paged at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. You never knew what time it was. It was always some time between 2 to 4 a.m. that they were being paged. But the one thing that they attributed to yes, it was annoying to be paged at that time, but it's even more so annoying to think about, well, now I need to identify the bug and I need to figure out, can I roll back just that bug, or am I going to have to roll back that entire build? And so feature flags gives you this power to be able to roll back just that area that's causing the issue, not the entire version, so that you're affecting other teams' work. So that's a really great way to be able to control the control when a customer sees that bug. And so here, we're going to create a feature flag really quickly in a demo environment. I'm super excited to show everyone this. And so the first thing that you're going to do is create a rollouts account. So that's going to be what we're going to be using to implement feature flags. So if you go to optimize.ly/spring1, you can create a free Optimizely rollouts account. So if you're following along, it'll take you a couple of minutes to do that. If not, you can watch the recorded version and do it on your own. The next thing that you're going to do, we're going to be using a code pen for this. So that link is optimize.ly/astro-codepen. And then we're going to follow the instructions in a gist, which has all of the documentation and exactly what we're going to do. And then also to note is that you'll need to turn off any ad blockers that you have on, because it might prevent this from working. But I've done this a couple of times and I know it works. So you'll just want to turn that off on your side. And then the last thing, I'll remind you of this as well during this portion, but we're going to be using our development SDK key to get that up and going. So I'll just leave this here for a couple seconds if anyone's following along. And I'll also send out the slide deck and links like that after the talk. Do this. So if you pulled it up, so you're going to create a rollouts project. And then I'll bring this up side by side. And what we're going to be doing is working out of this code pen. And so all of the instructions are in this gist. And I'll just do this side by side so that people can see exactly what we're doing here. This is a demo environment that we built. It's a simulated astronaut game, the beginnings of which. So in this case, if you've created an Optimizely account already, next here, we're going to follow the instructions along. First, we're going to initialize Optimizely with this code here. So if you want to copy and paste that in, what we're doing. So in this case, we're using, we've installed Optimizely via an HTML script tag. So Optimizely, the SDK, is available as a global variable here. So normally you would install it via package manager alongside your other third-party SDKs. But for example, for this example, in this demo environment, we're going to be using the script tag here. Next, what you're going to do is implement the feature flag. So we've already built a feature, and it's called the astronaut feature. But this would be very similar to what you would do in your own environment. I think a concept that I like to really hammer home on is that you're wrapping each feature that you'd like to control with this flag here. So in this case, the name of the feature that I'm doing is astronaut feature. But we want to be able to remotely configure that in Optimizely without redeploying our code every single time. So I'm just going to pull up Optimizely here. And what you're going to do is create a feature flag. And so in this case, in my code, the feature's name is astronaut feature. We want to make sure that's exactly the same because we want to be able to control it in Optimizely's UI. And so we're going to create this feature. So we'll do that. And then before I forget, we're going to go to settings and grab our development SDK key. So Optimizely defaults you to two environments, your production and your development environment. But like I had talked about before with controlled rollouts, if you work in, say, staging or QA or release candidate, you can add as many environments as you'd like in Optimizely. So we're going to replace that development SDK key here. And you'll notice that we're not seeing any astronaut just yet, right? And so here we've created the astronaut feature, but as you can see, you can roll out that feature in multiple environments and really having really granular control over which environment your feature is being released in. So in this case, we're going to choose the development environment, and you can create several rules for this, right? So if you're trying to target specific audiences, whether that audience, is by device type, or maybe you want to do by location. But in this case, we're going to do it for everyone for the sake of the demo. And it's really as easy as using this slider to control that. So the story I was telling about adaptive audiences, Ajit is his name. He was using this to roll it out, 5% week over week. But in this case, we're going to roll it out to everybody. We're going to click save here. That's really how you're going to create that feature and that feature flag. If we did all these things right and created the demo guides, we should be seeing an astronaut here, which we do, which is great. So if you're following on your own, you're going to see that astronaut. And then the other thing I want to quickly demo is, let's say that, that astronaut wasn't the right image that I wanted for the game. It was supposed to be a duck or something else, or it's the graphics not right. And so what I want to do here is use my feature flag as a kill switch, being able to roll that back very painlessly without having to go through another redeploy. So we're going to save there. It's going to take a couple of seconds to update. And so if that feature wasn't quite right or it wasn't quite ready, we're going to roll that back and Mr. Astronaut's going to disappear. And so that's how it would work as a kill switch. That's the portion of the creating a feature flag, and I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A part. And then with the last few minutes, we're just going to go over some feature flag best practices that a lot of people ask about that are pretty common. So I'm sure some of you were thinking, yeah, that's great to be able to roll out features the way I want. But the first thing that people bring up all the time is, what about tech debt? You're wrapping each feature with all these feature flags, and you're really creating a lot of tech debt here. What do you do? So folks do at Optimizely, we do a couple things. One, we use our Jira integration. So with Jira, every single feature flag that's created, a Jira ticket is created alongside that, and there's owners attached to it. We define every single feature flag that's used. One of the first things that we think about is this a short-term feature flag? Long-term, is it a vendor? Because sometimes you want to put vendors behind feature flags. So if they have an outage, you're not impacted by it. Is it a circuit breaker? Is it an experimental feature flag? So really defining those feature flags is really key to cleanup day, which goes to my next point is, once a month, we have a monthly feature flag cleanup day where our lead QA engineer reviews all the feature flags inside of Jira and says, okay, these need to be removed because this is a short-term feature flag and Jess is the owner of that, so she will take care of that. And so just having that process in place, and he really orchestrates us as an organization to follow on these practices, is really helpful. The second feature flag best practice is making your organization really resilient with a code ownership strategy. So over the course of your company, people will go and people will stay, but there will be changes. And I remember distinctly when one of the companies I joined, we were trying to work on a specific feature, looking through the code base, and commented out was, do not turn this feature flag off. Okay, that's pretty prescriptive, but what does this feature flag do? Why can't we turn it off? And there was no owner. We had no idea what this was. And so if you think about it, if you have a new engineer that's joined, that's pretty challenging to try to figure out all of these things before being able to work on that specific feature. So thinking through and making it really easy and visible for folks to be able to see, well, this feature flag does this, you can turn it on or you can turn it off. And this is a person that's the owner, this team owns it, so that you can pass things on along. For example, our monetization team at Optimizely owns specific feature flags for our plans page and for our plans. So our enterprise customers gets a set of features and our monetization team controls all of that. So just having everything really laid out and defined really helps once you're implementing feature flags. The next thing you want to think about, or that people ask a lot, is So feature flags add branching experiences into your code base. So you have to think about how your automated testing strategy interacts with your feature flags now, right? Because having a strategy to test every single combination just really isn't going to be sustainable. So you want to think about things maybe as you're going from unit tests to integration tests to end-to-end tests to manual QA. Maybe with unit tests, you want to test more frequently so you can have really strong building blocks. And then with the manual QA, you want to save for more mission critical items. But you really just want to go through and define what this automated testing and QA strategy looks like as you integrate feature flags. My favorite analogy, going back to the plane analogy, is embracing this idea of feature flag driven development. So, when you're flying a plane, you can map out the most ideal route that you want. But sometimes maybe you bump into clouds, or maybe there's a storm on its way that you need to dodge throughout the pathway. And so, if you think about a customer's experience, the pilot's going to make it so that they're going to have the most smooth ride possible. And I appreciate that because I hate turbulence. So with feature flags, you can kind of think about it as you're developing along the way, what can you feature flag and how can you make it so that these feature flags make it easy and are the guardrails you need to prevent and also not just prevent this turbulence, but to make it so that the customer feels the least amount of friction as possible. Last but certainly not least is actually something very interesting that I learned at Optimizely is this concept of deployment slushies. It's very fun to think about, but during the holiday season, during high traffic times, especially for like retailers, people, a lot of people are going to your website. You want to be very careful about introducing bugs, especially as you're continuing to deploy code. So at Optimizely, what we do is for 2 weeks on the calendar, we have something called a deployment slushy. So these softer deployment freezes keep your development trains running or planes running. And so what you're able to do is to continue deploying code behind a feature flag, and you're not stopping any of that deployment time, and you're continuing to deploy code without actually causing any friction or impacting any of that traffic that's coming through. So just to wrap that up, these feature flag best practices that you can see here, making sure that you're reviewing your feature flags regularly to remove that tech debt, making sure that your organization's super buttoned up on the code ownership strategy, thinking through how you can marry both your automated testing and QA strategy with feature flags, really thinking about embracing a feature flag driven development mindset. And last but not least, using deployment slushies to keep development in flight. So a couple of resources to check out. If you haven't already, you can create a rollouts account for free for feature flags. We also have a Slack developer community if you want to have any questions you want to ask me about feature flags. And then last but not least, some of the best practices that I covered are all in this ebook that my colleague Asa actually produced. And it is super in super detail. So if you're trying to get feature flags up and running at your organization, that can definitely help you get started. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at justina.nian@optimizely.com. Hope to see you at the Q&A. Thanks.
Oh, it's standing. Justina, thank you so much. And you hit the exact number you told me you were going to hit. You're like a professional. Thank you. Thank you so much. And that was a great presentation. I really appreciate that. Although, as somebody who spends a lot of time in airplanes, whenever I see a crashed airplane, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's not something I ever want to be a part of. And the idea of changing airplanes in flight, hopefully we never have to do that in the real world. But anyhow, I do encourage everyone to continue the conversation here. Click that little join the discussion link and head on over and ask the questions of Justina in our Slack channel, and we'll see what kind of trouble that gets us into. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to start talking about functions here. So that'll be coming up next.